Tēnā koutou, nau mai, haere mai. Hello everyone, welcome to the Walking the Shadowlands podcast. Let me be your guide as we take a walk into the realms of the unexplained, of the paranormal, of things that go bump in the night and haunt your dreams.
Your hosts?
I'm Marianne. Thanks so much for joining me today, tonight, whatever time it is, wherever you're living in this beautiful world of ours. Sit back, relax. Let me be your guide as we walk into the Shadowlands together and see what awaits us there. Death, the final frontier, to steal and paraphrase those famous opening words from the original Star Trek TV series uttered by William Shatner, who played Captain James T. Kirk in this classic show that spawned, so many other sci-fi shows. Is death the end of us, or do our souls continue on? Are we even aware that we've passed over, that we're dead, or does our manner of passing influence our awareness of our death? But actually, is death the final frontier, or is it merely a resting phase before we move on to a different journey, rebirth into this reality perhaps, or life on other planets, other realities? Many people have had encounters with loved ones, be they friends or family, who have moved on from this phase of our existence. But what happens if you work in an industry that deals with death on a daily basis, such as that of the funeral directors or undertakers? Do you actually have these souls around you while you're working on their bodies, preparing them for their funerals, their viewings, preparing their bodies for the opportunity for loved ones to farewell them, and to celebrate the fact that they lived and were loved? Do they have encounters with the spirits of these people? In this episode, which is our very first episode of this year in 2022, we're going to take a walk into the world of working with the dead, specifically in the field of funeral directors. But before we do, I want to welcome you all. If this is your first time listening to our podcast, thank you so much for joining us. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. And I hope, whatever your belief systems, that you had a safe seasonal break. It's awesome to have you all here and to be back. So, now we're here. Are you ready to walk with me into this part of the Shadowlands and see what awaits us there? Then let's begin. Right from the time that she was just a wee lass of 13 years old, my guest knew that she wanted to be a funeral director. In fact, it was right after an aunt's funeral that she told her mum that this is what she wanted to become, because she wasn't impressed by the way her aunt's funeral was held. She actually told her mum that she could do a better job than the Undertaker. When she was 16, the funeral homes in New Zealand had an open day, so people could go and visit and see what they were all about. So her mum took her to it. She recalls asking the funeral director 60,000 questions, and this only fueled her desire to work in this industry. So at 18, she finished high school and started applying at funeral homes in her hometown. Most of these places tried to dissuade her from following this vocation, and actually, at that stage in New Zealand, female funeral directors were like hen's teeth, very rare indeed. It was regarded as a male profession and not suitable for females. Eventually, my guest tried places in different cities and finally was able to get an apprenticeship with a funeral director and completed the necessary papers to become an accredited funeral director here in New Zealand. She eventually moved to Wellington with a gentleman who was just opening up his business there, and whilst in Wellington actually lived in the funeral home. Eventually leaving the profession due to family issues, she then married and had children. Now, with a young family who are currently her focus, my guest is planning on a return to the profession she loves when her wee ones are a bit older. I want to welcome my guest, Jenna. Jenna, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me today. For my listeners, Jenna is a member of my Walking the Shadowlands Facebook group, and we had a thread up. I can't actually even remember what the thread was about now. And Jenna spoke up about some of her experiences, her paranormal experiences that she had had while working as an undertaker in a funeral parlor. So I asked her if she would be willing to come on to our podcast and share these experiences with you, because the little that she did share was so interesting that I felt that you all would really be interested in hearing what she has to say. So Jenna, thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I know that it's a bit nerve-wracking.
Thank you for having me, Marianne.
It's and also it's really nice to put a face to the name, you know. Like I see all of these names that pop up regularly in the group, but you don't see the people behind them. So it's really nice to connect with you on that level as well.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a little bit starstruck. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Marianne.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, thank you. Tell me a little bit about yourself, about your work history, hobbies.
Sure. Let me see. When I was 13, that's when I decided I wanted to be a funeral director and a mum. And I sort of told my mum, it was actually shortly after my great auntie's funeral. And I went to go and view her and I was like, you know what, I could do a better job than that. So, at 13,
Wow.
cocky wee thing I was, but, and so I said to my mum, that's what I want to do. I think that was like, I think that would be really nice because I've always been quite about wanting to help people, and
Right.
and things. So my mum, bless her, she took me to an open home, which was unusual. I don't know if they do them anymore, but they had open homes when I was 16. They opened up all the funeral homes so that people could go through and tour them. And, I guess it just takes some of the mystery away.
Right.
And bless my mum, she took me through, we went in, I was having a good poke around the mortuary, asking like 60,000 questions to, the funeral directors and whatnot. And so that just really cemented it for me. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Fabulous. So when I was 18 and finished high school, I went and I worked in a daycare centre for a few weeks because I had done my early childhood degree, and then just decided that wasn't for me, and that I just couldn't shake this funeral directing thing from my head. So that was it. I went and applied to all of the funeral homes in my town, which is hard. It's a hard industry to actually get into. It's quite difficult.
Yes, it is. I have a friend who's just done about a year or so ago, she did a funeral director's course, and she just can't find work in the
placement.
area.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And, I got laughed out of a lot of places because I was so young, and they were like, oh, you can't handle that, And I was like, oh, I can. And, I had people trying to tell me horror stories and things. And I was like, that's fine. That won't bother me. It's all right. Anyway, I finally found somebody that gave me a chance. And so I started working with him. And then I got an opportunity to go down to Wellington with another funeral directing colleague that I had met. And he was going to open his own funeral home and asked me if I would go down there and open that up with him. So that's where that is the place where I was living in the home, because, there was only the two of us working there. So at the time, we didn't have anyone to fill in. And so you'd kind of go home and then get called back a lot. So there was no real point in paying rent
Right,
to
right.
live somewhere else, when I was spending so much of my time at the home. So, yeah, I just moved into the home, and, it was, really great. So, and I loved it. I did love it. I had to move away for personal um, family reasons. I had to move back home here. So I kind of fell into my job that I'm in at the moment, and have just kind of been rotting there for the last 15 years, just because it's convenient for me at the moment. And I've got little kids, so it's kind of hard to do the funeral directing kids with little kids. You can't get up and leave in the middle of the night if you have to. And,
yeah. Being on call is a hard thing. So did you actually do any training? Did you train formally, or was it all on the job training?
It was all on the job training. My boss down in Wellington, he applied to actually be able to train me himself, because he used to run a lot of the training programs back in his day. So, and he got accepted to do that, rather than my having to go. But you have to have 2 years on the job experience before you can even apply to that uni anyway.
Wow.
And he was sort of like, well, if I'm training you, I kind of want you to be trained my way. He didn't really agree with a 50% pass mark. He wanted 70% pass mark, because, you're no good to me if you can only do 50% of your job.
Yeah. That's a really good attitude. Yeah.
So, I was actually being trained by him, but they were formally recognizing a lot of that work. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was a bit of an odd thing. I don't think many people would have that opportunity, but I mean, he was an amazing man to learn from. He had so much experience. He'd done the Erebus disaster, and he had worked over in the United States, and he taught me so many things that I wouldn't have learnt at the normal training program. We worked on facial reconstruction and things like that, which were amazing. He had amazing techniques that he was able to take me through, and that I could learn that I wouldn't have learned elsewhere. Yeah.
Wow. And how did your parents feel about you doing this? Were they a bit concerned about you going into an area that some could see perhaps as morbid or
my mother wasn't. No, she was an incredibly supportive woman, and she had never ever made us feel uncomfortable around death or anything. We were attending funerals from before 5 years old, the family ones, and so it was all very normalized for us. And she was incredibly supportive. She would get a little bit nervous when I was hopping in the shower and gave her my phone and said, can you answer this for me if it rings? And she did have to a couple of times, and she did very well. But no, she was incredibly supportive. I did have some family members, especially in the older generation, that were just sort of, oh, what on earth would you want to do that for? Oh my goodness, why can't you go and be a secretary or something? That kind of thing. So, yeah. But no, my actual mother, she was very, very supportive of me, which was wonderful.
That's awesome. That makes such a difference, doesn't it? Especially since it's an area that a lot of people have fear about. They're very scared of death.
And it was very interesting, because I would find, in social situations, it's one of the first questions people ask you, isn't it? Hi, my name's this, how are you? What do you do? And then it would be really interesting. Some people would say, oh, I'm a funeral director in Mbama, and they would just blank stare at you and not know how to continue with the conversation. And, it's a bit, I found it a little bit of a strange reaction, but, I guess some people, it does make them a little bit uncomfortable. And then you have really morbidly curious people. Oh, so what do you do? You're like, oh, Lord,
Give me details. Yeah, right. Yeah. And then there are always that few that You really don't want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the jokes. Oh my Lord. Oh, how was work today? Dead, was it? Oh, come on, guys. They get old. They get old pretty quick.
I had a friend who was in the Navy, and this was back when there was a really popular song, Sailing. I don't know if you heard it back in the 70s, 80s. It was Sailing. It was a really lovely song. And every time that their ship would come into the harbour, the local radio station would play that song. And, they just got, like you, sick of hearing the same jokes, the same songs, the same. Yeah, I guess it's what's the word? People think they're original.
Yes, they do. Yes, and my fake laugh started getting less and less convincing, like,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah. That would be hard. Look, we've actually, how many years did you work in the industry?
I was in the industry for about 2 or 3 years before I had to move away.
Right. I can actually see you going back to it, to be honest.
I desperately want to go back to it.
Yeah.
Desperately, just when the kids are a little bit older.
Yeah, because it's like being like a medical personnel being on call all the time. I don't know if you heard, but a few seasons ago, I actually spoke to Dean and Karina Weber. I think that's their name. They're funeral directors up north.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
Yeah, and he had a couple of experiences as well. And I think it sort of goes with the territory when you're dealing with dead people.
I actually think you start to get quite used to it, it just becomes sort of part of, of your working life.
Right. Let's go back to the beginning. When a dead person arrives at your funeral home, how do you guys treat them like? Did you personally treat them like they were still alive and you talked to them as you were working on them?
I always did, yes. It just felt natural to me to talk to my clients, and that's how I always referred to them as my clients. And I would chat away and use their names and let them know what we were doing and what we were up to and, anything I would be doing. Sorry.
That's all right.
So it just was quite natural to me to talk to my clients and if it was quite sad, then, when I'm talking to them, like I would just acknowledge that or, and I've met your mum or I've met your daughter and, blah, blah, and just talking to them and letting them know whatever it was that I was doing as well. So
That's really cool.
Yeah, it just to me felt like a sign of respect,
I was just going to say that's a respect thing, even though they're not in their body, they're still around.
Yes, yeah, and I got that feeling quite often, and sometimes it would be a very, very strong feeling. So, just making sure that I was acknowledging that person and letting them know what it was I was doing. I always thought if it was me and I was hanging around and someone was, touching my body or something, well, I would quite like them to let me know what it was that they were doing and things like that.
So respect is really big, and it's really great that you talk to them like that. When you first started, 18 is very young to be in an industry like that, but it's no younger than being a nurse.
Yes, exactly.
And nurses deal with death all the time. I remember one time back in, it would have been the late 70s, 76 or 77, somewhere around there. And I was down in Wellington at the time. I was on duty, and you know what Wellington weather's like. When it storms, it can be really stormy. I was working in Lower Hutt Hospital at the time, and it was a really horrible stormy night, like all those horror stories, thunder and lightning. And I had student nurses on the ward with me, and we had this patient who just died. It's kind of a funny story. And I was training them how to lay out a body before you guys came to pick them up, how we wash them and we wrap them and we tag them. Well, they used to. I don't know what they do these days. And we were washing this body. And as we were washing the body of this person, I got the girls to roll him so we could wash his back. And at that minute, he expelled the air, so it sounded like he was moaning.
Yes.
And right at that point in time, there was this huge thunderclap and lightning. It was just a perfect timing as he let out this long expel, all this air out, and the girls screamed. Honestly, they both screamed. They ran.
I actually had something similar once when I was working with a young man that we had come in, and I had walked past him on the table, and his hand had slipped into the pocket of my scrub pants. And because I kept walking, I was moving his arm, which was causing the muscles to contract in his hand, and it felt for the life of me like he was squeezing my thigh, and I let out a little squeak then. I'll tell you that much. But it was funny because, his family were they let me know, he was a cheeky guy. He was always pranking people and, such a fun-loving character. And I was like, oh, yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. That does.
Yeah,
but
it was awfully, it gave me a big fright, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it would have. And were you in the room by yourself at the time?
Yes, yeah.
Even worse. Oh, wow. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I'll never forget these nurses. They just screamed blue murder. I literally screamed, and they both took off, and the charge nurse came in and said, what the heck's going on? I told her, and she cracked up. The girls had to go and have a cup of tea to calm themselves down. Yeah. But I understand. That would have been really scary for you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Our bodies do interesting physiological things.
yes, they do. They certainly do. And you do, it's like, you would have been more experienced nurse at the time. And, once I got a little bit more experience under my belt, it didn't give me frights as often.
So how was it for you when you first started? Did it take you a while to adjust to working with your clients?
Like in certain situations, it did. If we had a lovely elderly person that had just passed away from, natural causes and things, well, that was, that's what everybody expects you're going to be dealing with.
Right.
And so I was quite prepared for that. I thought I had prepared myself quite well for other situations, but some of them do throw you a little bit, and especially I'm quite an empathetic person naturally, and so a few of them I did find quite tough.
Right.
Unfortunately, my first embalming experience was a little baby, so that was a bit off. It just threw me a little bit, that one. But again, I was just talking to this little baby like it was just any regular little baby, and we were chatting, and I was just, it was, it was a bit rough, I think, for my first go.
That would be really difficult. I mean, you can deal with adults because they've had full lives, but dealing with children or people who died under traumatic circumstances must have been really difficult.
Yeah, I did find homicides quite difficult as well. And like I would have my normal feelings of just outrage, because it's that overwhelming feeling of no person has the right to do that to another person.
Yeah.
But we did have one in particular where it was quite odd for me to deal with, this rage that I was feeling towards the perpetrator. It didn't feel like it was my own, because I wouldn't think that I would have felt that angry, so
Right.
personally, just viscerally angry at this perpetrator. Whereas, of course you're outraged and of course you're mad,
Mm.
but every time I was around this person, it was just this overwhelming fury,
Wow.
directed at this perpetrator. And one of the odd things that was happening when I was working with this person was, you keep them covered. If you are not working on a certain area, you keep that area covered, much like when you're at a doctor or,
Right.
nursing. And this person's sheet just kept slipping off of the wound, off one of the wounds, but obviously I felt like that was probably the wound that was
Yeah. Right.
the culprit in the situation, because it was just so bizarre for me. Because and I would be putting it back, and I would be putting the sheet back quite firmly, and then I'd turn around and turn back, and the sheet's back off this wound, and
Wow.
and it was just this overwhelming anger, and it was not my own. And when I left the room, if I walked out, then I was back to my normal state of mind. So
Right.
yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. So obviously, this gentleman was influencing your emotions with his anger at what had happened to him.
Yeah, yeah, I believe so, because it was not natural for me to be feeling
Yeah.
that level of anger. Yeah.
Yeah. And was there any reason, any physical reason why the sheet would have kept slipping off of him?
No, because I was doing everything that I could. I tucked it under where I could and was like,
Yeah.
you know, stay, just stay. But it kept moving, and it was just so unexplainable to me. There was
Right.
nobody else in the room. It was just me. And it quite often happens that these things happen when you're on your own.
Right.
um,
I was going to
yeah.
say, do they? I would imagine it would generally be by yourself. But have you ever had things happen when there's somebody else in the room with you?
Once or twice. Just it didn't really happen that often when there was more than one.
Right.
Um, Actually, funnily enough, the two times I can remember off the top of my head, um, both of our clients were car crash victims, which I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it may not. But
Yeah.
it's just a little bit of an observation from me that both instances where we did have things move of what appeared to be their own accord, when both myself and my boss were in the room, both of them had suffered injuries in a car accident. So I'm not sure.
So what actually happened? That you got me interested now.
Yeah. So um, in the first instance, we were embalming this client, and again, I'm just talking away, and my boss was very used to me doing that.
Yeah.
um, and so he was over at the embalming machine, where he was mixing up fluids and things for me, and I was with the gentleman in question, and which was, so we had a long bench that went across the back of the room, and in the corner where neither of us were anywhere near, you know, um, we just had one of our tools just go flying off the bench, and it was just landed on the floor, and I was like, what? And my boss was a skeptical man,
Yeah.
but even he was like, what happened there? you know. So
Oh.
yeah, that was the first one, and so I just did what came naturally to me, and just you know chatted to the client again. And I was like, it's all right, it's okay, and there's nothing that can be done now, and we're just here to look after you, and it's all right. We're going to take good care of you and your family. So just reassuring the
Mm.
person, because um, that's what I felt we needed to do
Right.
at
That
that
mu
time.
that actually that must be very comforting to the souls who quite often are still confused, because, especially in traumatic situations like that, where they pass in traumatic situations. For you to be talking to them like that would be quite comforting to them. So that's really awesome that you did that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I keep trying to, like I say, always have myself in their shoes,
Mm,
like
mm,
because I am a strong believer in the afterlife and spirit and people hanging around. So, like I say, goodness me, if I was hanging around and I wasn't sure or I was upset,
mm,
I wouldn't like to be given the silent treatment,
exactly. So what happened in the second instance?
So in the second instance, again, it was actually in the embalming room. So the same place again, a different client. Um, and my boss was finishing up. Um, so he was suturing, and I was just cleaning down our client, just giving them a nice wash and clean. I was actually cleaning under his fingernails because he had a lot of. Um, he had been a mechanic, so
Oh, right,
had a
right,
lot of grime under his fingernails. So I was just giving him a little clean up, and so we were actually near the end there, like quite finished in that sense. And that one was we had uh, uh, like scrub apron type things on the
right.
back of the door. Yeah, and they were hooked on to a hook on the back of the door. Um, and I saw it out the corner of my eye, and it just jumped off the hook, like jumped off. It wasn't like there was a wind or it was blowing or
Right.
anything. It just popped right off the hook off the back of the door. And so again, and like I said, my boss was quite a skeptical man, but again, he was like, "Well, what?" Because there was actually no way that a draft could come into our embalming room.
Right.
So yeah, that was quite interesting too. And so I got the feeling from that one that was just a cheeky
Yeah.
person,
Yeah. Yeah.
wanting to give us a bit of a start and
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Have
know
some fun with you.
yeah. And
Right.
so, you have a bit of a giggle with him. And I was like, you just stop that, young man. Don't try to be playing games with me. So,
Good. That's a good way to handle it. Yeah. And so obviously, initially, it would give you a start, but after that, you dealt with it really well, I would say. And for your boss to be a skeptic and work in that area and see stuff like that, it must give him he's probably not as skeptical as he made out he was.
no, I don't believe, especially given how long he had been working in the industry, which was I don't know, 40 plus years,
Oh,
you
wow.
couldn't stay really skeptical. I really think that was just a cover story
Yeah, yeah,
or,
yeah.
or a coping mechanism.
Yeah. But also, I think if you're more open and spiritually open, like you obviously are and were back then, that spirit will make themselves more known to you.
Yes, yeah, and I believe that, I don't like I've never seen a spirit and like with my eyes,
Right,
except for this one time in the casket room. And it was just a flash. It would have been half a second, maybe.
right,
Um, but I was going down, we had a family coming in to pick out a casket for their family member. And I just went down to the casket room just to make sure it was all still in order and tidy, and because sometimes it would unknowingly, don't know how, but sometimes it wouldn't be in order. So
right.
I would go and check before we had people coming. So and just out the corner of my eye, and it was just a flash, but it was a silhouette of a man, and I was like, oh, that was odd. And it was just standing in front. just standing in front of one of the caskets that I had made actually. So I was like, oh yes, okay. We used to have turns at making caskets and
Oh,
things, and
really?
we used to have like a little bit of a healthy competition going on about, whose caskets were chosen more or, things like that. So yeah, anyway, I prepared the rest of the casket room, and the family came in, and they just walked immediately straight to that casket. And they said, this one. And, I was trying to explain to them that, actually was a display casket. It wasn't really meant to be used. And it was just one that we had displayed to show some of the things we could do with caskets.
Right.
And they were like, oh, no, this is perfect. It's exactly like his boat that he owned. And so I turned the lid of the casket around for them because I had placed a decal on there.
Right.
And it was a gone fishing with a man fishing off a boat, And they cracked up. They were just in hysterics, and they were just like, this is perfect. Like, this is absolutely perfect. Please. So I had to let them have it. I couldn't not let them have it. But it was just funny because I'd just seen that flash of a person standing right there in front of that one.
I've got goosebumps all over me.
Yeah. Oh, I have goosebumps remembering it. It was so surreal.
Wow.
So obviously this gentleman wanted that one, and it reminded him of his fishing boat. So.
And he obviously had a great sense of humor as well.
Yes. Yeah, and his family did. I mean, it was just so funny. I turned this lid around, and they just absolute hysterics. They were all laughing so hard, and they were like, it's perfect,
Oh, that's actually really quite touching and lovely that in the middle of their grief, their raw grief, that they could appreciate the humor in that. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, and it was wonderful. And so, yeah, we definitely let them have that casket.
Right.
So, yeah.
So now you lived in the home for a while.
Yes.
Did you have experiences when you lived in the home?
I did, yeah. I sure did. So, I had one night, and I was trying to sleep, and I just couldn't sleep. We had a little baby in at the time, and I just couldn't sleep. I could just hear baby crying all night, and and I would tell myself, it's not the baby. The baby is not crying, but that's all. It's all I could hear. It's all I could hear. And then, as soon as baby left our care, there was nothing. It was, silent again, and I could sleep. So.
That must have actually been, well, scary for one, but also incredibly sad.
It was actually quite distressing because I'm a woman, so I have those maternal sort of instincts, where if you can hear a baby crying, you want to stop the baby from crying. But when there's not an actual baby, you can go and pick up and cuddle and stop from crying. I was like, I don't know what to do, and to be honest, I didn't know how to handle that situation. Like we've talked about with the adults, I'd be like, it's all right, there's not much we can do. It's okay. We're going to take care of you. And I didn't really know what to do in the case of this. I didn't know if there was anything I could say or do really. So yeah, that one was a little bit distressing because I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, I would. As a mum, well, as a mum now, you might handle the situation a bit differently.
Yes, yeah, and it is interesting. I was very young at the time, so I didn't have a lot of experience. And now as a mother, I'm like, oh, I wish I had, I don't know, got up and gone to shush the baby, or I don't know.
Yeah. Wow, that must have been so difficult. I like it's enough dealing with death, but dealing with babies and little ones that pass, that's really difficult. And hearing something like that would be very distressing.
Yeah, that one was quite distressing for me, just because, like I say, I was so young and I just didn't know what to do or how to handle that. Yeah.
Have you had before we talk about more experiences when you lived in the home, have you had an experience that has really scared you?
Well, when I first started, we had a lady come in, and I guess it scared me just to do my job, really, because
Right.
we went and picked her up from her home. As you know, we can pick them straight up from home if a doctor's signed off on their cause of death and whatnot. So we went and picked her up from her home, and we brought her in, and she was wrapped up all snuggled in her blankets, from home. And
Yeah.
it was lovely. But um, it, it, it worried me because she was still so warm,
Right.
And I don't know if people listening would be aware, but when you pass away, your body temperature actually rises, actually gets warmer before you cool down. So I was like, oh, but she's so snuggled up, and
Yeah.
just leave her snuggled for a while, and so that really threw me off with that lady, and so that was okay. So I was just looking after her. I mean, you're a nurse, you were used to that, and I always said to my best friend, she's a nurse, and I always said to her I couldn't do that. I wouldn't be able to deal with being a nurse. I'm too anxious, and
Yeah.
it scares me. I'll look after the person when there's nothing else that can be done.
Yeah.
That's what I will do. Um, so yeah, that really threw me off. And like you say, when somebody passes away, there's just these normal bodily functions that happen, and personally, I have a phobia of choking. So this person, was just expelling liquid from her mouth and her nose, and I just panicked. Like I sheer panic, and I screamed for my boss, and he come running, and he just he had to calm me down. I had to go and have a cup of tea. He was like,
wow.
it's okay. It's all right. Anyway, I went back to the lady after I'd calmed down and had been convinced that it was fine and normal, and I apologized. I apologized to her. I said, I'm so sorry for screaming, and I didn't mean to scream at you. And that. So I kept working with her, but I did feel a hand on my shoulder after I had apologized, and it almost felt like she was saying to me that it's almost like she was comforting me at that point, and it was like a role reversal that we wouldn't normally have had. But I actually was terrified in that moment, so it, and then I felt awful for being terrified,
Right.
So I was apologizing, and it felt like she was comforting me, about that's okay.
That's actually really lovely, and kind of totally opposite what I was expecting. Like I was thinking of Scary Paranormal, and but that's actually really touching. That's actually really touching that she was concerned about you to let you know that it's okay. She didn't take offense.
Yeah, I haven't. I honestly, I didn't have any scary paranormal situations in the funeral home. I've had scary paranormal situations outside of the funeral home, but not in there. No, and I always felt like my clients knew that I was just there to look after them, and I had really good intentions.
Yeah. Intent is everything. I say that all the time in the group. Intent is everything. And certainly they would be aware of your intent for sure. Apart from you verbalizing it, it would show in your energies.
Yes. I just want to tell you this one story because this lady was it was the only time I've ever heard something come into my head so forcefully. And it was this lady that I was looking after, and her son was obviously grieving his mother. It was very sad, and he was quite a young man, and a lot of the time they kind of the families use you as sort of a counselor, a bit of a person to confide in and whatnot. And I mean, I had instinctively been able to make this lady up to the point where her family were just like, oh my gosh, she looks exactly like she's just sleeping at home. How did you do that? This is, look. And they were just amazed. And they could say, look, she just looks exactly like she's asleep at home. She looks so warm and, lovely and blah, blah, blah. So it was really nice. And so I had built quite a really good rapport with the family. And the son takes me aside and he says to me, I'm thinking about proposing to my girlfriend. And then I just got shouted at inside my head, no. And I was like, whoa. Like, I had no personal feelings about whether this man should or should not propose to his girlfriend. But it was intense. It was so intense. And it was like this dread, like, no, it was like this feeling of dread. And I was like, oh. So I just gently suggested to the young man, maybe you should just give it a few months and just grieve for your mother first and, move past this, a little bit and then, think about those things. I don't know if making big life choices right now is a good idea. So anyway, a few months later, they came in to finalize, their account and everything with us. And he pulls me aside again. He says, oh, really glad that you told me to wait. No, we've broken up now. Was never going to work. And I was like, oh, good. Because I just knew that was his mother. Just, no.
Oh, wow. That and when you heard it, was it like your own voice or was it another voice in your head?
No, it was not my own voice. And it was, I jumped a little, I gave myself a little jump at the time because I was like, oh, that was out of nowhere,
Yeah. Because
what was that?
Sometimes when spirit talks to you, it can sound like your own voice in your head, and sometimes it doesn't, obviously, in your case. Wow.
Yeah, no, it was just so, yeah. I don't know. I can't tell you what the voice sounded like. I don't think it would have sounded like her voice. I don't know. I don't know if it was a voice, I'm not sure if it was a voice because it was inside my head. It wasn't through my ears,
Right.
So it was just no.
Telepathic. Wow, that would have been a really interesting experience, I would say.
It was, yes, but I was pleased to hear that he hadn't gone ahead with that because I don't think his mother approved.
And great verification for you.
It was, yeah, it was. And I was like, oh, how about that? Maybe mum knew something that the rest of us didn't. Or...
Yeah, mums generally do, don't they?
Yeah, well, as a mother myself now, yes, absolutely, I can contest. So.
Yeah. So what other sort of experiences did you have living in the home?
So we, I don't know if many of them were to do with so much as living in the home, just as my experiences in general.
Right.
So living in the home, I was actually quite peaceful. It was quite lovely, have dinner and watch a bit of telly. Off I went to bed, and so most of the time I didn't have even if we had people there, and I'd always sign off with them before I'd went up to make dinner or went off to my quarters or whatever. I'd be like, right, I'll be back in the morning,
Right.
blah blah blah. But we had a couple of interesting things. One was that it was quite sad. So we had a father coming in and his son had been in a car accident and he was a young boy. And he was in a terrible position. It was an awful position. His son had passed. So he was in making arrangements with us, but his daughter was in ICU because she was in the same vehicle accident. So it was just an awful situation for him. He'd come in to do some of the paperwork that we needed to get done and try and make a couple of arrangements where we could. And then it was just, I just got this tight chest, chills, goosebumps.
Yeah, goosebumps, yeah.
And just this feeling of urgency, and so I was like, oh, this is okay. but I was feeling very uncomfortable with the type test and the urgent feeling, and I couldn't figure out why. You know, I'd scheduled enough time for us to be able to go through things. And he was talking away, and then he just said to me, "What should I do? You know, I don't know what to do. What should I do? You tell me what to do." And I just said to him, you know, I actually think we should just finish up here right now. You know, we can finish this later. I think you should get up to your daughter and go and see her. I think that's where you're going to be best. And unfortunately, later that afternoon, she left us and joined her brother. So, but he was able to be there for that. So it was just so, it was touching, but also very confusing to me. You know, I was so pleased that he got there and could have that time with her before, and could be with her and sit with her when she left us. But it was really confusing to me because I didn't know where that had come from. Do you know what I mean? When it's a feeling, it was just this odd feeling, and I was like, I don't know where that's come from or who's done that. You know, or is that intuition? Was that her brother saying, "No, Dad, you know, I'm gone. Get to my sister," or you know, But it awful, completely so sad. So we ended up looking after his sister as well at the same time. So
poor chap.
But yeah, I'm pleased that happened, because that did give him some time, you know, with her and to be there, because you'd just feel awful if you were stuck up at the funeral home and missed.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah. So that one was quite that was quite an intense feeling for me. And then I ended up feeling quite close with the family after, you know, because you do once you're
of course,
so involved with these things. And so that one. And then another one that we had was a gentleman who had committed suicide, but it was just weird because I was quite convinced from the moment I walked in the room to start looking after him that he actually hadn't meant for that to work.
Right.
And it was just, you know, I was just giving it like washing him down and things, and all I could feel was just regret, just this regret, and that kind of messed me up for a couple of days. Because like these feelings, I know they're not my feelings, so which is fine. But that one did kind of mess me up for a couple of days, because you're like, oh, dude, you know?
Yeah.
Really? And you know, he had kids, and if I was around his daughter, it just intensified so much for me, this regret, this feeling of absolute regret. And so it was really hard for me to actually, you know, you've got to try and conceal how you're feeling to do your job professionally as well. So it was, and it was, like I say, it was very confusing a lot of the time, because I know they're not my feelings, but I'm still feeling them. So to try and conceal that and do your job and be empathetic to the family. But that one bugged me. It bugged me for a while afterwards about, oh, you silly man, you know, like it bugged me that he hadn't really meant to really go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a cry for help.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. So that did suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can understand that. Now, and I can understand that it would have taken a while to get over those feelings, because, you know, it's one thing to see a person pass because of accident or illness, but in a situation like that, it brings up your own personal feelings as well.
Yeah, it does. And it's, I guess for me, I'm as much trying to look after their families as I am them.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
And there were a couple of cases, you know, that I've already spoken about. We've had the homicide one that we discussed, and the suicide one, and the gentleman with the 2 children, where I've just gone way above and beyond my job description, like what I'm actually supposed to do to try and help these families, you know, moving forward and things. So, especially where there are children involved, if there's anything I can do to try and help, you know, moving forward, then that's what I try and do. And I just, you know, it makes me feel quite close to these families, and like I really need to be trying to do everything that I can. But yeah, it was confusing as well some of the time, you know. So when these feelings, and you're like, these aren't my feelings, and you've got to keep telling yourself that, you know, like, these aren't my feelings.
And it's really great that you had that awareness. Clairsentience is what that's called. When you, that's the name for that. That's how I work mostly.
Oh, okay.
And until you're able to recognize that these emotions don't belong to you, it can be very difficult. But you obviously had that innate awareness that, hang on, this is from somewhere else, this doesn't belong to me. That's quite a big thing to have that awareness, especially when you're so young.
Yes, but like, I mean, being so young, it was still hard. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, because you're still developing emotionally.
You're
still finding who you are as a person, and dealing with that on top of it is a really big thing. What to you has been the most memorable experience that you've had? Memorable paranormal experience?
Sorry, I'm just
right.
trying to think about that. In my career as a funeral director and embalmer, my most memorable one is actually this is a older woman, and so it was a nice, you know, it was lovely. It was, you know, when I say lovely, you know, like she was a good age, you know,
right.
lived her life, and it was and bless, you know, she just died peacefully. She just slipped away, and it was, you know, so that's as lovely as you can get, I think, in my opinion. So and she, like, this wasn't a scary one. This wasn't a scary one. But what was memorable to me about it was when I was working with her, I was instinctively, you can ask the families for photos and things, you know, of your clients, just so that you can make sure you get things right. But you can only ask them for a certain amount of time before you actually have to just get on and do your work. So this time we hadn't had any photos of her. But it was bizarre to me because I don't remember a lot of actually working. I remember talking away to her, but I don't remember a lot of actually what I was doing with my hands and things. Do you know what I mean? And so I thought she looked lovely, you know. So we took her out for a viewing, and her family they were all just gasping, and they were just like, oh my gosh, that is exactly her makeup. How on earth did you do that? You know, that's exactly how she'd get done up to go out to a party or something. And I was feeling weird. Because I was like, well, I didn't, and nor can I. You know, when you're driving somewhere, and then you're like, oh shit, I'm here already. How did I get here? And you don't remember driving there. It was exactly like that. Like, I don't really remember too much doing it.
That's really interesting.
I believe that she was sort of
influencing you.
Like making sure we got her makeup and her hair right, you know. And it was just so bizarre because, you know, you have these photos that you put on top of caskets at a lot of funeral services, and it was the same. Just exactly the same. And hers was a funeral service where um, we were attending the graveside, and they were just lowering her down, and I felt two arms just around me, and I was like, oh, you're welcome, like,
Oh, that's lovely.
you know,
Oh, wow.
and so for me, that's my most memorable because that felt the most like a direct, hey, thanks, or
Yeah.
thank you, and I was like, oh, wow, but it just and that, I don't know what makes that the most memorable for me, but it was, and I think it was probably just this feeling that I got from the family being so ecstatic,
Yeah,
and she did look like this photo. It was
yeah,
crazy, and I wasn't trying. So for me, it's most memorable because I'm like, well, obviously, I don't think I was in charge of that whole process myself.
right.
Like I think that this woman was obviously just very particular about her makeup and her hair
Oh,
and her presentation, and she
yeah.
wanted it just right. So for me, it's memorable because I don't remember
Yes.
doing it. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That's really interesting. Yeah, very particular woman. Yeah.
Yeah, and just a lovely little squeeze.
Yeah,
Okay, bye.
that's really lovely. Wow. And it's not often that, people get stuff like that.
No,
Mm.
and another thing to me, I was a little bit like, oh, well, that's lovely, but I'm just the funeral director.
Yeah,
What do
yeah.
I get a squeeze for? Like that's my job. Like, yeah,
But it's like people, who think the nurses, it's our job, but our patients still appreciate what we do for them.
yeah, yeah,
And why should you be any different? Why
yeah,
especially, when you're dealing with a grieving family as well. So these people, these souls would appreciate, your clients would appreciate the fact that you go out of your way to help their family as well.
yeah. And I suppose that's right. I mean, the families will often give you a little bit of a hug too, and
Yeah.
say thank you and you know all of that. So I suppose it's not that different, really, when you think about it.
Now, I can't remember what experiences you put in the group that you mentioned.
I was just reading because there's a couple I've forgotten to mention.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Thank you.
Um, so quite often when I was working with somebody, um, and I was working on them, you get to humming as
Yes.
everybody does when they're working. If I wasn't talking, I was humming or I was doing something. I'm a little bit of a can't just be quiet and focus on one thing type of person.
Yeah.
Um, but quite often, and it just became normal for me, but quite often I'd just get random songs stuck in my head, and they'd be or random tunes that I wasn't even aware of stuck in my head, but I'd be, like humming away. And then they would be songs that would either come on the radio or, um, and this happened often enough for me to start thinking it was a thing, they would be used in the funeral,
Oh, service.
as like a song that was, you know,
Right.
um, related to the client. So yeah, it was, a lot of people do the photo slideshows with, songs playing in the
Yeah.
background, and quite often it would be one of those songs. I'm like, oh, I've heard that song. Oh, that's right, we were humming it,
Oh.
and things like that. So that was just a weird little thing that used to happen. So which I just found quite interesting. Because some of these songs, I either hadn't heard for years or, um, a couple of times didn't particularly like, but was
Yeah.
humming them,
Yeah, yeah.
Not like it was a favorite song of mine or anything. And then one tune I didn't even know, but then I was like, oh, I thought I'd made it up, to be fair. I thought, I was some kind of budding genius coming up with song lyrics whilst I was working, but it actually wasn't that. It was the song that they ended up playing at the funeral. So no, I'm not a musical genius that can just come up with songs off the top of my head.
Oh, that's funny. Were
I've
you
always wanted to
disappointed?
be musical.
Yeah.
Yes, because I have always wanted to be musical, but unfortunately, it's not actually my strong suit. So, um, yeah, so that was a bit disappointing for me. But yeah, and then the other one that I had was a young man, another cheeky young man. You'd be surprised how many young men get described as being cheeky,
Yeah.
when you talk to their families and whatnot. But when I was working on him, bits of my hair were getting flicked up, and
Ah.
I could feel breath down my neck, and just
Oh,
little
wow.
tweaks of my hair. And it wasn't even just while I was working on him, the whole time that we had him with us. I could be in the office or, you know, um, the casket room or anywhere else, making a bloody cup of tea, and then the
Yeah.
next minute my hair's going like this. And like it was just a real cheeky, and the family's like,
Yeah.
oh, he was such a cheeky wee thing, always,
Oh.
pranking people and making jokes and doing, and they were telling me all these stories about the practical jokes that used to get up to, and, the balancing the bucket on the top of the door with the water in it, and, like real trickster type thing. So, yeah, I would just acknowledge, like, yes, very funny,
Oh.
come on. And then I'd say his name, and I was just like, come on, mate.
And of course you were young, young girl, young male.
Yeah.
It's a normal thing.
Yeah. It was quite the breathing down my neck. I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, that would have been a bit creepy.
Yeah. But yeah, no. And like I say, so many of these things would coincide with when we had people in the home, and then it would, stop once they were gone, and they would obviously going with their family or moving on. One though, I did go to see a psychic, and she said she could see this young boy with me, and she said that he wasn't related to me or anything, actually she thought he was from my work, and she didn't know what I did at the time. And so, yeah, obviously had a little bit of a clinger there for a little while.
Yeah.
That's all right. I don't think that he stayed for too long. But yeah, it was just funny that I'd gone to see this person at the time, and she said, oh, you've got a boy with you. I think he's related to your work. What do you do?
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So in the home, like apart from the ones that you've told us about, were there other things like knockings and footsteps and stuff like that?
Yeah, look, and there were, but that was just so normal for me that it didn't bother me anymore.
Right.
Like because we would have the doors go, the doors would open and shut. Like I say, the casket room always getting messed with.
Yeah.
And it wasn't me, and it wasn't my boss. He swore it wasn't him, because
Yeah.
I was accusing him left, right, and centre of going to mess up my casket room. Things just like the little casket pins, and then they'd be like on the shelf, next minute they're knocked off the shelf down the back or whatever. And I'm like, did you go in there again? I can't find the, casket pins. And he's like, I haven't even been in there. And yeah, little doors opening, shutting, technical things, a lot of computer glitches, and we had a giant vinyl machine so that we could cut out some of these decals to like personalize caskets a little bit more where clients wanted, and then that would fritz out,
Yeah.
You have to try and restart that again. My coffee machine, which I wasn't impressed about, I started talking to people about that because like, just don't mess with my coffee machine, leave it alone. Like,
I can understand that one, being a coffee person myself.
Yeah, just things like that. I did, and I don't even know if this was a paranormal experience, but I did growl anyway, because I was having a shower and I hopped out the shower and I was just drying myself off, and then all of a sudden the temperature just went like just real cold, and I was like, get out of here. This is my personal space. So had a bit of a growl there.
That's actually if that was your first instinctive reaction, then that was correct. One last thing before we do finish. Have you ever had a client that you have felt was really evil, for want of a better word?
No, I don't think I've had a client that I felt was evil or nasty or anything. I've definitely felt in another homicide case. I've definitely um, felt energy around the situation,
Right,
and most likely the perpetrator. And when I was working with this woman, I felt sad a lot, like
right.
like a sad life type
Mm.
situation. Um, but it made me incredibly uncomfortable when people were talking about what had happened. It made me incredibly uncomfortable. So I
Right,
believe that the perpetrator in that situation, who was unfortunately known to the victim, was probably a very
right,
evil person. Yeah.
right. But
Um, and it
yeah,
was difficult because it was in the news a lot too. And so, and just working with her, you get this feeling of that man
right,
is evil, you know. Like,
right.
and hers was a very sad life. That's how I got the feelings,
Yeah,
was, from them. So no, not a client. I've definitely felt something evil outside of that situation in my personal life,
sure.
which scared the living bejesus out of me. I'm happy to share if you want.
Yes, please.
Um, I was 16 and bulletproof, as you are at 16.
Mm.
And for one reason, my friends and I had been messing around with Ouija boards.
Ah,
Mm. And I was still skeptical that my friend was moving this coin,
right.
to freak me out or to scare me. So I decided to do one on my own.
Ah,
Yeah, not smart. Um, so,
yes, once again.
and this is scary. This was terrifying for me. Um, so I, by myself sitting there with my Ouija board and calling things, and then next minute it starts answering, and I was desperately, desperately, desperately wanting to talk to my great auntie who had just passed away. I was very, very close with her,
Ah,
and um, I'd gone through a bit of depression, like just really missing her after she'd passed away, and I was very upset. So I was really hoping that maybe I could get her, like if no
mm,
one else was around, maybe I could get her, and we
mm.
could talk. Um, so the board's moving, and I'm sort of impatient. So I'm asking, is this my auntie? You know, and it's going yes, but then some of the other answers were not adding up to things she would
Right.
say or the way she would answer questions or anything like that. And I'm kind of freaking out in and of myself that it's actually moving when it's just me as well. So just bear that in mind,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm having this like crazy, oh my God, it's actually working. And then I started to become quite scared because I was like, I don't actually think this is my auntie. And
Mm.
why would it be pretending to be my auntie, if it's not? And so I got quite worried. So I was trying to say goodbye to this thing and it wouldn't say goodbye. And I took my finger off the coin and
Right.
the coin just started moving towards me by itself, like just by itself. I wasn't touching it. And it moved off the board and it was coming towards my person. And I was so scared. And I picked it back up again and put it back on the board. And I was like, right, I'm going to go now. Okay. And then it just kept coming off the board and coming across the carpet towards me, this coin across carpet towards my
Oh,
person. And I was terrified and I just ran. And I didn't close the board. I didn't finish anything. I just ran outside and I just refused to go back inside the house for 2, 3 hours until somebody else got home because I was just so,
wow.
so, so terrified, because it felt so threatening to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, and I couldn't understand why this coin was coming at me. And it clearly wasn't who I thought I was trying to talk to. So yeah, that was that's been my most terrifying paranormal experience that I have had.
That would have been really scary, and you're sensitive enough to energies, obviously.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have had all these experiences to recognize when something's not right. And so, what did you do? Did you cleanse your home afterwards?
Yeah, I had to build up quite a bit of courage before I could do much, to be fair. I think I actually went and slept in my twin brother's room for like 3 nights, and then I was like, okay, I got to do something, because, I've watched enough horror movies to know that you don't just leave these things unattended. So yeah, I had to wait till everybody was gone, because I couldn't tell my mother I'd been playing with a Ouija board, So yeah, I had to wait till everyone was gone, and I got a couple of my friends around to come and help me, And yeah, we did it. We did a cleansing of my house, and then yeah, it was just scary though. It was just so scary.
That's a very good cautionary tale, and probably a good way to end our conversation.
Yeah.
Perhaps not so good for people listening if they're listening at night. It might give them a bit of creeps a bit. But look, Jenna, thank you so much for agreeing to come and share your experiences. It's been a very, very interesting chat.
Thank you for having me.
I want to again thank Jenna for being so brave as to come and share her experiences with us all. It can be very scary and daunting for some guests, especially since the Walk in the Shadowlands is listened to in over 85 different countries. And also, I approached her in my online group out of the blue. So it was very kind of her to agree to share with us all, and I really appreciate her patience in waiting for this episode to air. I have to say, it's so good to be back with you all, and I'm excited to see what this new season will bring for us all. Today's bumper music was called Beyond the Grave. If you enjoy this podcast and have considered becoming a sponsor, now's a great time to join. Just head over to patreon.com/MCC15 and sign up now. As a patron, you get early access to the podcast episodes and a special members-only page on the podcast website that has bits that end up on the digital cutting board, and little extras like full, raw, unedited video conversations with guests, EVPs caught during the conversations, and so much more. Also, you can download full written transcripts of each episode, and you get my absolute appreciation and gratitude. Patreon.com/MCC15 for just the cost of a cup of coffee a month. And so you don't miss out on an episode, make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. This podcast is available on all free podcasting platforms, including iHeartRadio and Pandora as well. Also, if you have Alexa, simply say these 4 words: open Walking the Shadowlands, and Alexa will play our latest episode for you. Check out our Facebook page, Walking the Shadowlands, our Instagram feed of the same name, and our Twitter feed at Shadowlands10, TikTok under walking_the_Shadowlands. Like and follow for teasers of our upcoming episodes. If you don't have a smartphone, then you can listen to the episodes from the podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. For those hearing impaired, there's a full written transcript of each episode on the website, so you don't miss out at all. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your workmates about our show. Encourage them to listen and to subscribe also. The more, the merrier. Thanks for listening to this episode. Ka kite ano, oia koi. I'll see you again.
Thanks for listening.